Hey, Crystal, good morning.
Hi, Dan. I feel like this is a little deja vu.
I feel like this is just a continuation of Tuesday. Like this
X
is,
Day continued with a different brand.
it did. It did. It just continued on. So no, that was a great event. It was really fun.
Yeah, so fun. And I do like hanging out with you.
I don't know. You said otherwise earlier, so I'm not too sure.
We're on camera now. I have to make sure.
Oh, that's right. I mean, no, you were saying all good things.
I
So.
know. I love you and I love live with Dan and I love.
See, this is official, like, so this is recorded.
You can bring that back to haunt me later.
Exactly, exactly. No, great. So what sort of announcements do we have today? I know we have some things coming up, right, that we want to push.
Yes, and I was not a good sidekick today. I don't have the links, but I want to get them.
All right. All right. Well, I know we're coming off of X Day on Tuesday, which was a big event that we had. I think if you missed that, you can still go back and late register and watch some of those. Is that right?
It's actually the full 6 hours is already sitting on YouTube. And then today
Perfect.
I got all the videos edited and I'll be uploading those today. And if you're in the APAC region or the, UTC -8, they're actually replaying it in live time with commentary from Adidia and the APAC team.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
So if you're in that region, you can actually watch it in live time with other people and get more, do like a live Q&A and not just have to like watch it solo by yourself.
Oh, that's perfect. I like that a lot. That's a good idea. But if you haven't seen it, go back and watch it. There's obviously a great presentation by Vivek, the CEO, on QuestionPro, or what we're going to be releasing in the next few months and how we're thinking about things. I know I did a panel discussion with Bill from Amazon, Tara from Kellogg's, Kyle with the BCJ group, formerly with the MBA. And it was really interesting. A lot of good insights there. My head is still spinning from it, but it was really fun. Yeah. And then
there is, if you watch the full live stream on YouTube, you get all the color commentary that happened in between the sessions. Whereas like, I cut that out on the individual sessions, and I was like, oh, live, like all the shenanigans didn't make it.
Oh man, that's a bummer. The shenanigans are part of the fun.
I know. If you want the shenanigans, just like find the times between the sessions, and those 10 minutes were cool.
Awesome.
I do have the link. We have two we have a webinar and we have office hours coming up. Office hours happens monthly and it's hosted by me and one of our much smarter and more talented survey professionals. And it's just an hour where you can drop in and ask us literally anything. I mean, you could ask us like, what is the meaning of life? And we would probably try to answer it. But it is very
we try to answer it through a survey. That's what we would do.
Through a survey or through instant answers.
Instant answers. We don't know, but we know people that might know, right?
So we do that, but it's also a great opportunity to find like hidden functionalities with QuestionPro. We actually go over some of like the feature updates every month. And so if there are things that you're like, wait, I thought they had this, but I don't know where it is now, or it might be updated, come to office hours. And then we also have a webinar coming up with our guest.
The guest today, right?
Yes. About the crossroads of CX and digital empathy.
Awesome. So that's coming up on the 27th. In just a moment, Jonathan Hawkins will be joining me, and we'll talk about digital empathy, kind of give a precursor to it. So actually, I think with any more announcements, without further ado, maybe we can bring Jonathan in now. Might be good segue.
I don't have that much. It's summer's coming, man.
I know summer's coming. Summer's coming. Let's bring him in here.
Yeah.
Adam. Hey, Jonathan. Welcome to the show.
I love coming into a chair. Thanks, guys.
We are the ultimate woo team.
So as we were mentioning, Jonathan, we're promoting the webinar that's going to be happening on the 27th. I think today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about digital empathy, what people can expect from the webinar, and talk through this. I think it's a relatively new concept for some people, so it'd be good to give them a precursor to that and also help prep them for the webinar. But your company, Anthrolytics, you want to give a brief explanation on that and then sort of maybe what digital empathy is all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we're a new company in a new category, really, in terms of digital empathy. And we're focused on giving companies the data that they need to create empathetic experiences, marketing, communication strategies in an increasingly digital world. And I think this question about empathy is a really big one. It's very often used, obviously, in terms of leadership and employees, but ultimately, people are people. And we all want to be treated empathetically. And I think really until I've got an amazing team on board with frankly more PhDs there. I think I'm probably one of the few who doesn't have a PhD. So I do feel a bit dim sometimes, I have to say. But they've created this amazing solution by really combining behavioral and data science to allow companies to predict the emotional response to events or sequences of events and linking that to the subsequent behavior that a customer is likely to take. And of course, because you can now link emotions to behaviors and events, you can now link that to measurable outcomes such as, let's say, reduction in retention, increased revenue. So very much the traditional sort of metrics that every CX program, if you like, is trying to achieve. But of course, now we've been able to do it linked back to the individual behavior, which has a far stronger correlation than many other ways of doing this. And I think the important thing is with what the guys have come up with is that we're able to do this for every customer every day. So we're not reliant on somebody having contacted you or you having interacted with somebody. We're able to provide this emotional score on every customer. And that's what we mean when we talk about digital empathy and allowing organizations to operate a digital empathy program at scale. Because I think it's one thing when you think about empathy, and we tend to think that, look, I walk into the corner shop, the guy knows me, and he's empathetic, and so on and so forth. But right, you're a major bank with 60 million customers, right? Well, how do I create that at scale through digital? And so that's really what we're trying to solve at Anthrolytics.
Okay, no, that makes a lot of sense. I understand that. What sort of, I guess, in terms of digital empathy, what are you measuring? Are you measuring? You mentioned like interactions at certain transactions and things. So are you measuring like, okay, based on this transaction, they felt happy or whatever those emotions are, and then you're obviously predicting their future behavior based on previous. Can you give a brief explanation on how you guys are looking at that?
Sure, absolutely. And I think it's important to say at this point, look, there are lots of solutions on the market which will predict emotion. And that's kind of not the clever bit of what we're doing, right? There are speech technologies, there's NLP, NLU, there's a whole bunch of great companies who are doing that kind of work. And I think what we're doing is taking that to the next level. Okay, so in terms of what does a company need to do this? It's pretty much what any company of scale will have already. So they'll typically have surveys. I mean, certainly all the QuestionPro clients will do, in the majority. Majority of major organizations have surveys with verbatims, and so what we do is we use that as the mechanism to start building the emotional models and the emotional personae. And now we can say, okay, well, Crystal experienced this, said this about it, and we can start building out emotional models of people like Crystal, people like Dan. Then we then use, we build that as a model. We then use operational data so that we don't have to rely on you having contacted us and rely on you having left another verbatim. We use the operational data around the event or sequence of events to predict what you're likely to do next. And I think it's really interesting that I think people have been talking about this kind of stuff for years, and I think a lot of companies have tried it in a way that really tries to identify what exact emotion is Dan feeling at the moment, or Jonathan, or Crystal. It's virtually impossible to do, right? I mean, you can. With the best will in the world, none of us, as good as we are, can predict exactly what you're feeling now. However, what we can do is sacrifice a little bit of accuracy for usability. And I think if you start taking that approach to it from a machine learning perspective, I cease to have to worry about the segment of one, and I start being able to use a segment of people that I can bucket into likely behavioral groups. So that's how we think about it. So it's very much data that everybody's got, right? It's verbatims, it's operational data, transactional data, and as I say, we build that on an emotional score for everyone, and that's how you start running the data play out at scale.
Okay, that makes sense. So each person essentially in their database or CRM or whatever for a company gets a certain score, and then based on that, what sort of actions are you doing differently based on different scores, or what are you recommending that companies do?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a couple of examples, Dan, and I think sort of use cases, if you like. I mean, one of the keys is that you're trying to not interrupt your customer, right? I mean, we're all sick of getting a variety of, sales pitches and what have you at times when we either don't like a brand, we don't care, or frankly, we're just ambivalent, which honestly is most of us. We've pretty much right? I mean,
that's the worst.
Exactly. All right. I mean, really, and I think this is one of the other key things. I'll get back to the use case in a minute, but I think you start thinking about how consumers have changed, and I think a lot of companies are really focused on the operational efficiency side, and I think consumers now think of that as a hygiene factor. Look, I don't give my cell phone provider any credit because I can make a call, right? Because they get my bill right. I do give them credit for interacting with me in a way that doesn't interrupt how I feel, and make sure that they're appropriate in their communications with me.
True.
So I think there's a couple of things. One is, when you start thinking about customer journeys as an example, if you can now start understanding the correlation between an event and sequences of events along that journey with behavior, you're now able to start building out journeys which can drive your strategic outcomes, but in a way that provides more choice to the consumer, right? So rather than trying to force fit people, you're now saying, well, how do I make people feel? And how do I make people how do I want to make people feel? And you can start building empathetic experiences around that. And then obviously, once you've done that, start measuring, make adjustments, usual processes for any form of sort of change management program. The other sort of primary use case is, of course, marketing. And I think there's an awful lot of talk nowadays around, customer experience in marketing, empathetic marketing. And, certainly when we ran the original POC on this, we frankly saw some results. It's what encouraged me, honestly, to get involved in it. And I'm so passionate about it. But we ran it at a very major organization, with a customer base in the tens of millions. So hence, I feel very at liberty to use the word at scale.
As you should.
So I'm pretty confident on that front, albeit being the cynical guy who's been in the industry for too long. But but really what they were able to do is start segmenting customers in a different way. So you've got your traditional methods of segmentation, but now you start adding in a layer of what we call empographic segmentation. So segmenting with empathy and building that into your existing models. You can now start saying, okay, well, Dan and Jonathan may well be in exactly the same segment. And so traditionally we would just pump marketing material at Dan and Jonathan equally. So what we can do is we can say, well, actually, based on the empographic segmentation, we know that Dan is actually far more receptive to buying, and Jonathan's very ambivalent, which is exactly what this organization did. And so consequently, what they saw was that when they did this, they pushed sales literature effectively to try and upsell people to only those people who were receptive. And on A/B testing, they saw an increase in revenue of 20%, and of course a reduction in marketing spend by 40%, because of course you're actually only marketing to a far smaller segment. So it was quite a remarkable outcome. And the other thing that sort of came out of it was this group of people who were not really they wouldn't be your traditional suspects for churn, if you like. If you looked at your churn model, these were not really people who were kind of displaying the traditional things of churn. They were ambivalent. They never responded to marketing material or any form of interaction with the organization.
Right.
But the predictions that we ran said, well, actually, these people in the next few months are quite likely to start exhibiting behaviors of churn. they did was starting to put in loyalty campaigns really based around, right, this is why the brand is valuable to you, right? We're not just a commodity provider, we're valuable. This is how we can help you in life moments. And then two interesting things happened. One was that this group of people started to become more economically active. And whilst I don't have any measures on that, it was very prevalent, and the organisation said to us very clearly that, look, we're seeing very much an uptick in terms of activity from this group of people who have previously been ambivalent based on the loyalty marketing campaigns we put in place. But also, as a byproduct of those campaigns, the churn in that group of people also reduced by 10%.
Oh,
so whether you're looking at growth as an organization, whether you're looking at reduction in churn as a metric, and I think the important thing here is that, we give organizations the ability to really focus on customer lifetime value through both growth and churn reduction. So that's where we're focused.
Interesting. So one question I had, obviously, sort of, detractors, promoters, kind of comes into the play here. So are you saying that even people that maybe identify as a promoter under this model that you have would be identified as, hey, they would show up in the churn portion, you think? Or I think traditionally it'd be like, hey, you're a detractor, you're probably likely to leave, right? But maybe it sounds like what you're saying is even there's people that are like, promoters or even passives that maybe would show up in this model and then you'd market to them differently. Is that fair?
Let's put it in those terms and think about it like this. Okay, so I can very generally, you're taking me back to my SAT metrics days here, Dan. Right?
Sorry, I know.
MPS. But think about it like this. I can be generally a promoter of a brand, right?
Yeah.
And I can have one bad experience with you, and I'm still broadly going to be a promoter of that brand. It's not enough to dent my loyalty to you. Mm-hmm. However, I could have experienced a couple of events in the last 2 months that probably left a slightly bad taste in my mouth. So am I going to start not using you completely? Absolutely not. However, if you send me something to try and upsell me at that point, right, I'm not going to buy, right? Yeah. And I almost need a kind of arm around the shoulder to say, look, we've got you back here. We know you're a promoter, and this is why we're still a valuable brand to you. So that's how you would deal with me empathetically in that instance. Okay. Now, the group of people that I'm talking about there, in terms of that churn reduction example that I gave, if you put it in MPS terms, would be probably people on the cusp of being a detractor and a passive. Mm-hmm. And so actually moving people on that cusp is actually a very valuable thing to do, because honestly, in most of the organizations that we'll be dealing with and do deal with, they're typically commoditized organizations with a focus on CLTV, financial services, telco, etc.
Right.
And so, generally I'm pretty ambivalent about it, as I say, but if I can just nudge them ever so slightly, and this is where a lot of the behavioral science comes into play. Mm-hmm. And I think very, very interesting in terms of sort of UX experience design, how do you start thinking about behavioral nudges and what have you to move people along? And I wouldn't be professed to be an expert in that side of the world at all, but it's, it starts to get fascinating. But equally, I also think people can think of it in quite a scary manner, right? It's like,
yeah.
Look at your face, Crystal. I know. But I think the key here is, look, we're actually trying to make the world a better place, because what we're trying to say is, look, we're giving brands the ability to not bother you when you don't want to be bothered, right? And when you are receptive to something, to give you more choice, to give you better options. And so I think there's this whole ethical question. We talk a lot about sort of ethics in terms of this kind of predictive behavioral analytics,
right.
And the vast majority of brands, I think, is there may be some kind of horrible subsegment of brands somewhere that I probably wouldn't want to do business with, but big global brands understand ethics. They understand how to how they should behave. And I say the ethos is to use this to increase choice for consumers, not to have some kind of dark art that moves right. them from one point to another.
Right. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. Do you see this being like a CX program, that traditional, or is this a digital empathy program that they would implement?
I have a secondary question to that too.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Crystal.
Would you also, I'm thinking of use cases like Southwest, where their CS team and their social team are some of the like most like they are at the top of the like priority matrix at Southwest because of their engagement on Twitter and Facebook and in those social networks. But so much of that is more anecdotal empathy because it's based on the on the sales rep or the CST person. How do you then like put those like anecdotal modeling into like how do you model those interactions into digital empathy?
Right. Okay. So I think they're almost two different things, Crystal, because I think the I mean, you're absolutely right. The empathy on that kind of one-to-one basis, and the Southwest Social team is awesome, right? I mean, as are many of them around the world.
I don't fly them anymore, but I still like enjoy their brand.
I love Southwest. It's my airline of choice for hopping across the states. But I think, is an individual empathetic, and are their social teams empathetic? Absolutely, and they do a great job of that. And I think they obviously screen and train very well for that. So I think there's this sort of question of how do you train people to be empathetic? And you see an awful lot of that in contact centers, right? It's a very, very big way there. And so we're not. We don't provide companies with training around empathy. We don't at this point in our evolution, but frankly, we're a startup, so roll forward 5 years, who knows what we'll be doing, right? But at this point in our evolution, we're not training people around empathy, because I think there are lots of organizations who do that probably far better than I could ever do it or my team could. What we do, however, do is give the organization, so in those examples, the social teams and the CS teams, the knowledge around what people care about. What is. So let me give you an example, Crystal. Perhaps you could envisage an instance whereby I've got an emotional score on Crystal. As Crystal calls into the contact center, we know Crystal is either happy and receptive to buying something, perhaps needs to be routed to a more empathetic agent. So it starts to get very granular based on the emotional score around you.
Now, does that then just like, I mean, we talk about like CX programs and we talk about CST teams and we talk about social teams, and it really seems like it more needs to be like a holistic approach to the consumer journey than being like, oh, I'm gonna like marketing's gonna score them this, and then they're gonna get handed off here, and then they're gonna get handed off here.
You're absolutely right, and I think that I mean it's a far more sort of philosophical discussion about this sort of the future of CX, right? Because look, I mean you're absolutely right. I mean CX, whether we like it or not, is a broken industry, and I think that there are. But it's an amazing industry. But I think people have kind of, in some respects, forgotten what they're there for. You know, we're there to provide and organize our companies around what is great for the clients. And I think, you know, our clients expect an organization. Certainly, you think about what we've all been through with the pandemic, the socio-political events of the last few years. You know, our expectations have increased dramatically on organizations, and we want to do business with organizations who have, you know, a social conscience, who look after their entire ecosystem of stakeholders, not just the shareholder. And I think that's where the disconnect of CX comes, Crystal, because companies haven't quite caught up with that yet. And that's why, look, frankly, I could be ahead of the market, because I think we give companies a lot of data to enable them to start thinking more holistically around it. But, you know, I think that a lot of CX programs, certainly the contact center side of it, is very focused on operational efficiency versus really understanding what does a client want. And so I think there's a disconnect because things have moved so fast over the last 12, 18 months, you know, and I think consumer thinking has changed so dramatically. I mean, you look at all the surveys. I mean, I think something like coming up 90% of people say that empathy is the most important factor in loyalty. Yet organizations are trying to improve their operational efficiency. And so I think part of it is speed. And when you're dealing with big companies, it's hard to turn that tank around, right? So so that's
you see this as a like digital empathy program or platform that someone would implement at a company. Is that how you're looking at it, Jonathan?
Yeah, the way I'm thinking of it is, I think of this more as sort of back-end system because it does have multiple uses, right? And I think that me coming in and saying, look, here's another login and a bit of desktop real estate you need to give up for an empathy score is probably not going to be well received. But I do think that people have invested very, very heavily in terms of the MarTech stack, CRM, CDPs, obviously VOC platforms like yourself. Yep. And what I see us being able to do is ingest data from those types of platforms that are already there, transform it, add another layer of detail, and then push it back into the VOC platforms in order to drive additional value from the investments you've already made. So I certainly don't see us as either competitive to any of these platforms. I see us very much as adding value, another layer of value, and allowing you to start to do very different things with it. Again, opens up that world of, is it a program? And yeah, I think ultimately they will be. I think at this point in its evolution, it's probably too early to say, Dan, but a lot of the stuff working on around the sort of methodology and how do you build out a program, I think is very relevant, and I think is something that we need to develop as an organization and as a category as we build out. Right,
it makes sense. It sounds like it's very complementary to anything that a company is already doing, right? Like
absolutely. And because I think there is great tech out there, and I think and there are a couple of missing gaps, and so we're trying to just plug the gap.
Got it. Makes sense. Well, hey, Jonathan, I think that's a great spot to end it today. If you want more, Jonathan's going to be doing a webinar with us on the 27th of May, so make sure you sign up for that. And Jonathan, thanks so much for joining us today on Live with Dan.
No, thanks for inviting me. Very kind of you. Take care of yourself.
All right. Bye. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks. Bye now.
Bye. Nice. That's a whole new ball game there, Crystal. New concept.
I know. I also felt so called out. There's people who could use this for nefarious.
I knew where your mind was going, though.
So good. It looks like we have a question.
Oh, do we? Oh,
sure. From LinkedIn. So the LinkedIn doesn't always
it doesn't always pair. So
yeah, you can almost run it in a separate window.
Yeah, there was a question. So we can get that answered. We'll make sure Jonathan gets in contact with them.
Yeah. But I think you have a data point happening today,
yes, too. I do have a data point to wrap up this program. So I think, as we all know, we have heard about, at least, or maybe a lot of people have also been affected by the Colonial Pipeline shutdown. So this led me to really want to find out what people thought the reason was for the shutdown. So I should say this was using our instant answers tool. 144 people answered this, and in no time at all, under 15 minutes, asked this question, got these results back. So I think no surprise, 66% knew that it was held ransom, right? Mm-hmm. By hackers. And, they obviously wanted their payment before they would release the, I guess, the ransom or pay the ransom to then, open up the pipeline again here. So, but I think what's interesting is some people thought there was a massive leak, right? So
there's gasoline everywhere.
Yeah, there's gasoline flooding everywhere. And then annual maintenance was an interesting one. 11% said Biden shut it down. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And then
you kind of baited them by making it an option.
No, I did, but I was trying to think of other options, right?
No, I know, but just watch the news, people.
Yeah, watch the news. But I do think there's, I know you're big on conspiracy theories. I think there is a conspiracy theory here with maybe there was too much gasoline in the market, so they wanted to inflate the price. There were almost 3% that said that.
I liked my better one where it was a foreign entity trying to cripple the U.S. market, but that's probably too close to the truth.
That's another data point here we got to do.
But being able to run these polls so quickly on things that are happening in the real world in live time is super valuable and interesting for anything.
Yeah, really valuable. I just did this for the show today, but you can see this has many applications for our clients as well. So
Yeah.
if you're interested in that, feel free to reach out. But I think with that, we can end the show today. So
have a wonderful weekend.
you too. Thanks for joining me, Crystal.
Bye.
All right.